Welcome to the show Mediocrity, where there's only one episode and it sucks. I'm White, your nervous host. Today we'll be exploring the wonderful and cheery world of Edgar Allan Poe's Murders in the Rue Morgue. In it, we see the different ways that masculinity and femininity are represented in the novel, as well as how it reflects both the author's social commentary and the time period in which the short story was written. It sounds really boring, but the important thing is I tried really hard to make it interesting, and the story itself is fantastic. I wish that I could talk about my history with this book or something so I could transition into the main topic, but I read this book a month ago for this project, so transition. That was terrible. Why are you even doing this? You'd be surprised what a final grade will make you do, young and averagely rude guy whose voice I did. In case you haven't read the story, which you should, it's really good, here's the quick summary. Some nameless idiot decides to pair up with the genius, i.e. Dupin, and some murdering starts to happen. Dupin decides it's worth his time to solve it because he's bored and the police are idiots and can't put more than two facts together at the same time. When the duos arrive on the scene, two women are completely destroyed. It's kind of weird how hard they were killed. I mean, look at this. It's 1841. This would scar young children if they read this. One body was literally forcefully jammed into the chimney, so much so that it took a couple of people to remove it, and the other had her hair ripped out so her head was completely red with blood. So Dupin starts putting together all the pieces to the murder puzzle and solves the murder instantly while the police just drool over themselves. It turns out the murderer is not a person at all. It's this orangutan that the sailor brought over to France to show it off. Dupin confronts the sailor breaks down and admits his role in the murder. Dupin is like, that's cool, I guess, and the sailor goes on his merry way. This short story is seen by historians as the first modern detective story. Other novels can't take this title because they were lazy and didn't try hard enough to come out first. Although Das Fräulein von Scuderi by E.T.A. Hoffmann and Zadig by Voltaire were fair contenders for the spot as well, both predating Poe's work. I guess Poe just hit a certain sweet spot for the judges and got the title. Poe's work inspired other writers to create and shape their characters, such as Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot. Looking at it this way, Poe is responsible for a large population of fangirls on the internet about Benedict Cumberbatch. Poe, the original Tumblr girl. Okay, now the real serious research. During Poe's period of writing, it was a common thought that males and females should abide by preconceived roles of their sex, and any other traits than masculine and feminine, respectively, should be looked down upon. This is made clear when the readers see that Poe most likely imprinted himself on the character in Murder in the Rue Morgue, Dupin, allowing his own views of the wanted characteristics of the sexes to be seen. Okay, now the real serious research. During Poe's period of writing, it was a common thought that males and females should abide by preconceived roles of their sex, and any other traits than masculine and feminine. Poe demonstrates his own views on women through the circumstances and thoughts of the characters. For example, Dupin notes that women are weaker than men when he says, a heavy club of wood or a broad bar of iron, a chair, any large, heavy, and obtuse weapon, would have produced such results if wielded by the hands of a very powerful man. No woman would have inflicted the blows with any weapon. Dupin explicitly states that a woman could not have done this act because it required vast amounts of strength. This creates a standard that men must be stronger than women, and heightens the sense that masculinity is prevalent through the short story. I doubt, though, that any human being would be able to shove a person up a chimney like that, though, so I guess it's fair to say that a woman technically couldn't do it either. The standard of femininity is also seen in the quote, "The The daughter lay prostrate and motionless. She had swooned. The screams and struggles of the old lady, during which the hair was torn from her head, had the effect of changing the probably pacific purposes of the orangutan into those of ungovernable wrath. When the orangutan first appears in the room, the first thing the young woman does is faint, as opposing to fighting for survival. Granted, anyone would be terrified of a giant creature in the room nowadays, let alone at a time when most people didn't know what exotic creatures there were in the world. But it's telling that the woman would actually faint instead of just screaming. This delicate nature of the female characters reflects the time period's expectation that women cannot handle many things, and must rely on others to handle their problems for them. While this may be true for most women in post-society, it's reinforced very clearly for the higher-class woman. Because Poe's writing is written purposely for higher-class readers, his writing almost directly reflects the way that society determines the way that people must act. His writing could also be the influencer of society. After being raised in that time, his opinions would most likely align with what society had taught him, and by writing according to those rules, he reinforces the rules instead of simply showing what they are. The concept of women being fragile is expanded upon in the quote, "The wild disorder of the room, the corpse thrust with the head downward in the chimney, the frightful mutilation of the body of the old lady. These considerations, with those just mentioned, and others which I need not mention, have sufficed to paralyze the powers by putting completely at fault the boasted acumen of the government agents." In this murder case, the victims are not only women, reinforcing the trope of women being helpless in protecting themselves, but are viciously torn apart, playing upon the time period's mentality that women must be protected. Just between us, though, I kind of want someone to protect me if a crazy ape appeared in my room. That's terrifying no matter what time period you live in. In turn, the violence of the murder invokes a man's masculine side to help solve a murder of two innocent women. According to Poe, it's a man's duty to protect the sanctity of a woman, even after death, by the entire power of him. Masculinity is shown to be fierce, powerful, and violent. As seen when Dupin immediately assumes the perpetrator of the murder is male in the quote, "I look for the man here, in this room, every moment. It is true that he may not arrive, but the probability is that he will. Should he come, it will be necessary to detain him. Here are pistols, and we both know how to use them when the occasion demands their use." It never occurs to any of the characters that the killer might be female, as the women in this time were assumed to be innocent and needed protecting. This is before the trope of femme fatale was present, so no one ever suspected a woman to do anything but be models of properness. Funnily enough, the opposite is now true. In a murder mystery, more specifically hard-boiled mysteries, the first person that people suspect is the woman, like in Crooked House and Josephine. In Poe's worlds, though, a man could never be killed by a woman because of their weaker strength. Only a man can kill a man, and even if Poe had decided to use a female as the killer in his story, there would be a heavy stigma and morality problems once she was caught and dealt with. She could not be killed, as that would be morally unacceptable, but she couldn't get away with it either, as that would also be morally unacceptable. This is quite the conundrum for the time, and resulted in every single murder in the stories being male, or at least a male animal. It kind of took away from the mystery factor if you know that it's the guy that did it, Can you imagine going into a movie and the killer has a name tag that says, "I'm the killer" on it? I know I'm not the only one that would be bored. Actually, that would be pretty funny. I want a movie about that now. The perpetrator of the crime, the orangutan, is a representation of masculinity and men in and of itself. And no, it doesn't mean men are animals. We're a step above that, thank you very much. The violence of the crime and the depictions of the body of the creature, thick, muscled arms, powerful chest, are representative of a masculine man's power. The short story also associates the creature with images of shaving, as seen in the quote. As the sailor looked in, the gigantic beast had seized Madame L'Espanaye, not the best with French names, by the hair, which is loose as she had been combing it, and was flourishing the razor about her face in an imitation of the motions of a barber. Although not within the realms of what a man can actually do, as much that would be metal, the orangutan's actions while killing the women and rummaging through the house leave the impression of masculinity. Although masculinity in this time associated itself with power and control, it also sounded on being a gentleman, and having a calm and rational approach to events, much unlike me when I failed to record this properly. I basically have a temper tantrum every time that I mess up. After Dupin finds the orangutan's owner, Dupin reassures him that he will not be hurt when he says, "I pledge you the honor of a gentleman, and of a Frenchman, that we intend not to harm you." Being a man in this time meant that you fight to protect women and children, but also show restraint and honor, much like a knight or a superhero. Not Deadpool, though. He kind of does the opposite of restraining himself. A ruthless and violent man is no gentleman, portraying anything else but perfection of the rules of nobles means that their masculinity and femininity would be in jeopardy. Respecting your opponent is one of these aspects seen when Dupin compliments the sailor by saying, "I like him, especially for one masterstroke of cant, by which he has attained that reputation of ingenuity which he possesses." Holding your emotions in check is key to it appearing as refined and gentlemanly, and insulting someone in front of you is extremely emasculine and would not be the pillar of righteousness that the feminine ideal would search for. The most you could do was slap someone with a glove, which, to be honest, was probably way better. My point, though, is not to belittle or wave away this story. Yes, it is sexist, and yes, it reinforces stereotypes of gender, but so what? It was a product of its time. It shaped the way that a genre evolved, and above all else, it's an amazing story. I should know. I decided to do a project on it. I feel that dismissing something just because you don't like an aspect of it doesn't do justice to the piece of literature. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft was an incredibly racist man, both as a person and in his writing. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't an important figure in literature. And there are thousands of naked art pieces around the globe, but that doesn't mean that they're obscene and unworthy of praise. I think the bottom point I'm trying to get here is that art and literature is more than just a single aspect. You have to look at it from a faraway point of view to see the true meaning of it. Okay, that was really stupid. I better get away before I start preaching morals or something. Finishing thought, the short story is literally the core of detective fiction. Some sexism was involved, but whatever, and go read it. It's on the internet for free. This has been the show Mediocrity, and I will never see you again unless you stalk me.